Okay, we are here. We're going to talk about how to solder the end of a water pipe, a copper water pipe, which most people probably have in their house if it was built, I'll say before year 2000. The first thing you want to make sure is that when you're cutting the pipe, say you had a broken pipe in your house and you were going to repair it, and you went to the hardware store and you bought a new piece of copper pipe, which I just bought this morning at Ace in Oakmont. And so your first intention is that I'm going to go get a hacksaw and I'm going to start cutting this off, okay? Well, I did that just to kind of show you what happens whenever you do that. And so what ends up happening is you end up with like a piece of metal, or the edge of a piece of metal, that ends up looking like this. It has all these little burrs all over it. They're really sharp, kind of stick out there. And say I was going to put a cap on it just to kind of to seal it up. I can't even get the cap on there because the burrs won't let it slide on there, okay? So you would never ever use a hacksaw, and if you did, you would have to take like a file and file these off and then get it so that it's a lot smoother, okay? The other thing about it is when you use a hacksaw, you can tell that that is not a straight cut at all, and basically the reason why that happens is that the blade on a hacksaw is a little bit flexible, and so it can twist and turn and not give you that straight cut that you're looking for. What you're really looking for is some sort of pipe cutter like this. They make bigger ones, they make little ones. This is obviously a little one. So you would usually take this, put it over top of your pipe, tighten it down with your hand, make sure it's like on there the way it's supposed to be. You turn it several times. Usually you end up using gloves at some point in time, which I'm going to use right now. And you guys have seen this in a previous one when I talked about a pipe cutter. And so usually you just keep tightening it, turn it, tighten it, turn it, and you just keep on going until you get it cut, okay? I already cut this one, so it's like nice and even. And so the difference between the two ends is this. So again, this is the one that I cut with the hacksaw. This is the one that I cut with the pipe cutter. It's a very clean, straight, very nice edge. The cap that I'm gonna put on there is nice fit right over top. Again, the burr one, can't even get it on there. Can't get it on there without filing it. And again, that's a lot of extra effort. These are only like $4 or $5, maybe $7 at most. And they're a great thing for cutting metal pipe, okay? So not only that, not only we have to keep a clean edge on it, we have to get the actual oxidation, because copper oxidizes. I'm sure you guys have seen pennies before. Some are really bright and shiny, and some are really, really dull and dingy. So what you can watch the difference between this. So you're going to take a little bit of a steel wool, and I'm going to just kind of clean up the edge here. You also want to do the inside portion of the pipe as well, because again, that is going to get some solder in there. And so let's kind of just get this. They also make like little wire brushes that you can attach to like a drill. There's hand ones as well that kind of do a little bit on the inside. What I just did was I just kind of balled up a little bit of a wad of the steel wool, and I'm just going to get it on the inside, okay? And you can see that that's much cleaner than it was a minute ago, so it's really bright. Whatever you're going to attach to it, you want to do the same thing too, okay? So for example, on this one, I want to get this pretty clean as well. And so I'm going to clean that. This one's got to get a little cleaner too. Okay. Let's get this sticker off here. It's not great. As best we can. Love stickers for getting the price of stuff, but I hate the paper ones because they're so hard to get off. If they would make them out of plastic, it would be so much easier than doing all this. Okay, so I got most of that off there. Again, I'm going to still use my steel wool to get that cleaned up a little bit more because I don't feel like it's very clean. Still has some sticky residue on it. Let's get this all cleaned up. Looking pretty good. Okay, that looks good. Do the same thing on the inside like we did with the big pipe. Clean it out there, make it look good and shiny. Okay. Okay, so that's all we need to worry about with the cleaning and the cutting. And make sure, again, you want to do the outside and the inside. Make sure that it slides right over, which is, as you can tell, goes right very nicely on there. Let's make this a little bit bigger for you guys so you can see it. That might be it. I might not be able to make it bigger for you guys. Okay. All right. All right. So now I'm gonna use my flux. That's what you need to use in order to get it, it's a must. Flux is a must, okay? So this is regular paste flux. It's for metals in general. It usually is used for copper. It looks just like this. It's kind of a brown, pasty looking stuff. I'm gonna use a paintbrush, which is right here. And then sometimes they come with some of the fluxes come with like a little brush that's already built into it. I'm just gonna use a little paintbrush that I had sitting here in the room. And so what you wanna do is you wanna make sure that you put the flux only where it's gonna touch the inside of this. The other thing you gotta make sure is that you aren't gonna put this whole thing the whole way on there so that it's coming out at the other end. Because again, this is a connector, so you only want it like halfway, okay? So what I usually do is I put just the flux that I need to get halfway through this pipe, okay? And you gotta put it inside the pipe as well. You can't just do it on the outside. So I'm gonna kind of smear it a little bit, and again, just half of it. I'm gonna put like a little more than a half inch around this pipe. Get it all on all sides. You can't just put it on the top, it has to be everywhere. If you get a little over on there, it's no big deal. And again, get it on the inside, and then slide your piece on there, again, halfway. So half the pipe should be this way. If I was gonna come through with another connector, it would go on there that way, okay? So now I got my flux on there. I'm ready to solder, okay? So what you're gonna need to solder is you're gonna need a propane tank, which you guys can see my propane tank's pretty big, it's a big one. I use an electric starter one. So rather than having like a clicker, sometimes they make little clickers that can start a fire from the propane tank. But this one has almost like a little clicker like you would see on like a lighter, a bigger lighter, like for like a campfire. So I'm gonna turn this on and I'm gonna start to heat this. Now my biggest question for you guys is, am I gonna heat this side of it or am I gonna heat this side of it? The common sense part would be you're gonna heat all of it, but that's not really how that's not really how soldering works. Soldering works on, it pulls into the joint that you're trying to do, and it draws towards the heat, okay? So if I was heating this side of the pipe, all I'm doing is drawing the solder away from the joint that I'm trying to put together. If I heat it on this side, I'm pulling the solder into where I'm trying to seal, which is around the side of the pipe, okay? So what's gonna happen with me, I'm gonna take my torch and I'm going to heat mostly on this side. And then I'm gonna take my solder and I'm gonna set it right in here, like right here. And I'm gonna go around a couple times and it's gonna pull that solder the whole way in to seal this all this up. It'll put solder the whole way inside there. It'll flow where I put the flux, okay? So let's see that happen. Solder over here. I always wear eye protection, so I got my eye protection on so I can make sure. I like what they showed on the video, so I'm gonna do that as well, where they bent over their solder so they can kind of get it, so you can kind of get it around different sides of the pipe. It's a little harder to do it if it's straight. Again, if it's straight, then I gotta constantly move back and forth, but if it's bent a little bit, I can get around that angle, I can get up underneath there like that. It makes it a little bit easier, okay? So let's try this out. Don't push it in, don't blob it in. You aren't gonna heat the solder here and try to blob it in there, that's wrong. You're heating the end of this pipe, you're gonna try to pull that solder up into that joint, just like that, okay? So that's what we're gonna do. Turn on your gas, click it, boom. Again, make sure you got your safety goggles on. Let me get my gloves on, actually, before I do that. Turn that off real quick. Safety first, I don't wanna touch anything that's gonna be super hot, which it will be. Turn it back on. Doesn't need to be crazy high. Get my flux ready, or my solder ready. And the other thing you want to make sure you're doing is that you're heating the whole thing. So I'm not going to just put heat on one side. I'm going to heat it from the bottom to the top. I'm going to go on that side. I'm going to keep going around and around. Because again, you don't want to just heat one side and get flux or the solder on one side. You want to get on the bottom, the top, everywhere. So you want it to flow everywhere. It has to be hot everywhere. So I'm going to heat this piece. It'll start turning kind of oxidized black a little bit because it's getting so hot. you get like an odor, and that's just the flux burning off. A little bit of odor there. Okay, you can see it's getting kind of a green tint. Again, that's the flux burning off a little bit. I'm gonna take my solder, I'm ready. I feel like it's hot enough now. So watch how it flows really fast. You always wanna keep the heat somewhere on it. Boom. Push it in there. Actually let it cool in there. And come on this side. And in the back, like we talked about before, make sure it's not gonna drip on your arm if it is gonna drip, which it shouldn't. I did get one drip there. Like that. Sure seems to be it. It looks good. Obviously you can tell it's super hot. You don't want to touch that in any way, shape, or form. Just let it sit, let it naturally cool down, because again, if you start messing with it with a pair of pliers, or you start to try to put it together right away, it's still setting a little bit, so you want to make sure that that's something that you want to make sure that it naturally cools down, okay? So then what would happen next is you would take your next section, and you would come back and you would clean this all up, because you would still have to use your steel wool to get that all cleaned up, all inside and everything. Do the same thing with your next joint. Get it all cleaned up, get it all in there, slide it in there. Do the same exact thing where you would heat this and you would pull that solder in that way, so it would go back in this way, okay? That's what you want to do. And that's how you're going to connect them, and that's how it stays together. That's how you solder a copper pipe.